The sirens begin to wail. Fighter jets streak across the sky, and in the distance you hear the sound of gunfire and explosions. We're at war, but this isn't any ordinary war. It's a battle humanity is unlikely to win. A war against ourselves, against what cannot die, against what is already dead. The zombie apocalypse has begun. You've seen this before, in movies, TV shows, video games, comic books. The format doesn't matter. You recognize the setting, and now, we are going to explore just how real something like this could actually be. Are you ready? Because they're coming for you. Let's start with the facts. A quick search on IMDb shows more than 330 movies and series with the zombie apocalypse theme. We're not talking about just one or two zombies. It's an outbreak, a plague wiping out everything we know as civilization. Dawn of the Dead, The Walking Dead, The Last of Us, World War Z, Train to Busan, Night of the Living Dead. For some reason, we're obsessed with this kind of story. In real life, death is treated with reverence and rituals in almost every culture. The deceased aren't simply left lying around. There's respect, a spiritual significance behind it. And that's exactly what makes zombies so terrifying. It's the return of the dead. Corpses rising, walking among the living, and attacking them. We went deep into the roots of this myth, from its origins to the different versions of undead beings found across cultures. And of course, we looked into whether a zombie apocalypse could actually happen. If it did, would we stand a chance? Or would it be game over for us? You'll find those answers in this video. And if you like this type of content, our Curiosities series, leave a comment with topic suggestions. The universe, biology, hypothetical doomsday scenarios. We love talking about this stuff. And don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's go back to the beginning. What is the actual origin of zombies? Truth is, no one knows for sure. The term zombie has evolved drastically over time. But there's one thing historians agree on. Humanity has always harbored an ancient fear of the dead. Let's rewind to ancient Mesopotamia, one of the cradles of civilization. This is where writing began, which means it's also the birthplace of recorded history. And no, I wasn't there. Stop it. There's a famous poem from that era called The Descent of Ishtar. Ishtar was a powerful goddess, and in the story, she descends to the underworld, furious. Here's a quote from the poem. "If you do not open the gate for me to enter, I will break it down. I will shatter the bolt. I will smash the threshold and till off the doors. I will raise the dead, and they shall eat the living. The dead will outnumber the living." Yeah, very chill, right? This text was written over 1,000 years before Christ, and it's already describing a zombie apocalypse. If Ishtar doesn't get what she wants, the dead rise to devour the living, and they'll outnumber us. This shows us that the fear of the dead returning has haunted humanity for a very long time. Different cultures have created different types of undead creatures. What's that? A being that died but somehow came back. Ghosts count too, but here we're focusing on reanimated corpses. There's a wide variety of them. For example, Rykolakis, from Greek folklore, a corpse that returns to feed on the living, especially their liver. Rusalka, from Slavic myths, often the spirit of a drowned woman who lures people to their deaths. Draugr, from Norse legends, a reanimated corpse guarding a tomb or treasure. Oryk, from Turkish lore, a corpse brought back by witchcraft that feeds on human flesh. But our focus here is the modern zombie, specifically the movie zombie, a unique creation of pop culture. The true zombie as we know it today first appeared in Haiti between the 17th and 18th centuries. For those who skipped history class, Haiti had an enormous population of enslaved Africans brought by French colonizers to work on sugarcane plantations. The conditions were so horrific that many slaves believed even death wouldn't set them free. They feared that their souls would never find rest, condemned to eternal slavery. This fear gave rise to the voodoo religion. No, not the cartoon version. Forget everything you saw on Woody Woodpecker. In real voodoo beliefs, only shamans, hungans, can bring the dead back to life. A zombie in this context is someone who disrespected a shaman and was cursed, forced to serve them forever as a soulless, undead being. This idea spiraled out of control in 1927 when William Seabrook visited Haiti and wrote The Magic Island. The book was full of racist stereotypes, wild claims, and exaggerated fears, and it sold like crazy. American readers became convinced that Haiti was crawling with zombies and evil shamans. The book even inspired the 1932 film White Zombie, starring horror legend Bela Lugosi. That Haitian-style zombie, hypnotized and obedient, was a brief trend in Hollywood. Until 1968. That year, everything changed. George Romero released Night of the Living Dead, shot in black and white, with no big-name actors, and made on a tiny budget. This film created the zombie as we know it today. In Romero's world, the dead rise for no clear reason. They have no master or curse controlling them. They hunger for living flesh. A zombie bite turns you into one. The only way to kill a zombie is by destroying the brain. These rules still apply today. Romero laid the groundwork, and curiously, he never used the word zombie in the film or its promotions. He called them living dead. He wanted nothing to do with voodoo or Haitian folklore. He created something new and terrifying. It was a French film magazine, Cahiers du Cinéma, that first called Romero's creatures zombies, and the name stuck. From that moment on, the meaning of the word was forever changed. Romero's zombies weren't just monsters, they were metaphors. His film came out during the Vietnam War, at a time of deep division in American society. The zombies symbolized fear of your neighbor, fear of your family, fear that someone close to you could suddenly become a threat. Night of the Living Dead became a way for people to process what was happening in the world. It became a symbol, and the zombie genre never really went away. In fact, it's probably stronger than ever. New directors continue to explore fresh angles. The zombie has become a flexible metaphor. Fear of losing individuality, fear of cultural collapse, fear of pandemics, or fear of the other. And that's why the myth of the zombie refuses to die. But now, the big question: could zombies ever stop being just a symbol and become a real threat? Could the dead actually rise? Romero's zombies are the living dead, clinically dead people, often decaying, who somehow get back up and start killing. And Romero never tried to explain how they come back. That was genius. The unknown is always scarier. But let's think about it for a second. Say someone dies of cardiac arrest. Their body is intact, maybe even still warm. Why couldn't we bring them back? There are medical procedures to try to revive someone. CPR, defibrillators, etc. They sometimes work. So why can't we revive people more often? That's where the science comes in. And we looked into what really happens to the body, the brain, and the cells after death. Could we ever reverse it? Or worse, could science somehow bring someone back in a way we can't control? At first glance, the body may seem completely intact, but on a microscopic level, things have already gone horribly wrong. At the cellular level, the damage is done and there's no turning back. Think back to those biology classes. All of our cells are wrapped in a membrane. This membrane is like a barrier that separates the cell's inner contents from the outside environment. It's what keeps the cell alive, deciding what goes in and out. But, like everything else in the body, cells also die. It's happening right now. Thousands of your cells are dying this very second. And that's totally normal. Cells have a lifespan. They die and get replaced all the time. As cells approach death, their membranes start to break down. When their time comes, they follow one of three paths. They spill their contents, they get broken down by other cleanup cells, or they self-destruct. Any of these paths is irreversible. Now, when blood stops circulating and oxygen and nutrients are cut off, the cells begin dying rapidly. Every single cell in your body will go through that same death process. To simplify, your body starts breaking down. Without cellular cohesion, you rot. You know that Frankenstein idea of sewing body parts together and creating a monster? Biologically impossible. Those cells are already useless. Muscles won't contract, blood won't flow, organs are falling apart. Nothing works. There's no binding, no way to make it function. Science has shown that this process of cellular death isn't instant. Some cells can survive in a dead body for quite a while, even days in some cases, but they can't keep the body going on their own. And guess which cells give up first? Brain cells. After just 10 minutes of cardiac arrest, brain cells begin to rupture. At that point, brain damage is guaranteed. So yeah, it's safe to say that reviving a body after a certain point is impossible. Even if it looks fine on the outside, inside it's already a disaster. Or is it? In 2019, a team of neuroscientists at Yale University pulled off something incredible. They developed a chemical solution made of nutrients, proteins, and other compounds called OrganX. Using it, they managed to partially revive the brain of a pig that had been dead for hours. Yes, a kind of zombie pig, but hang on. The goal wasn't to bring the pig back to life. The researchers just wanted to study how neurons connect and behave after death. No one was trying to build an undead army. In the experiment, they induced cardiac arrest and let the body sit for an hour. Normally, that would destroy the brain. But with the OrganX solution, they reversed much of the cellular damage. Why is this so groundbreaking? Because it could revolutionize organ donation. When someone dies, there's a very small window to harvest organs before they start to degrade. That's why they're put on ice right away. Cold temperatures slow down metabolism and delay cell death. But even on ice, the clock is ticking inside each cell. OrganX managed to revive organs like the brain, heart, liver, and kidneys in pigs. If this technique is adapted to humans, it could allow us to preserve and use many organs that are currently lost, potentially saving thousands of lives. To be clear, no pig stood up and walked away. This was cellular-level recovery, not a full-body resurrection. But it might be the first step towards something far greater, maybe even the ability to bring a person back from the dead someday. Here's something wild about the OrganX study. For ethical reasons, the pigs were sedated so they couldn't feel pain, and they were also given drugs to block any chance of regaining consciousness. In other words, the pigs didn't come back to life, not in the literal sense, because that part was intentionally prevented, but all other basic cellular functions did restart. They found that the treated cells began repairing their DNA, maintaining themselves, and preventing further death. Heart muscle cells started beating. Liver cells started absorbing glucose from the blood. Mind-blowing, right? Now, just to clarify, OrganX wasn't designed to create zombies. It hasn't been tested on humans. It didn't bring back an entire body. It doesn't offer eternal life. If you rip out the pig's heart, it's still going to die, and no amount of OrganX will fix that. But still, it's an incredible breakthrough. Dead things starting to function again. That's real. So could this lead to a zombie apocalypse? Maybe all it takes is a few decades of research and a major leak of something like OrganX 3000, and boom, game over. Not quite. Zombies have one more key trait: pure, uncontrollable hatred for the living. You can't talk to them. You can't reason with them. It's kill or be killed. And that brings us to a new scenario. What if, instead of literal resurrection, we had an epidemic of rage? Zombie movies are like zombies themselves. They die, and they come back. One major resurrection happened in 2002 with the film 28 Days Later. It broke many of Romero's rules. The infected weren't dead. They weren't slow. They were terrifyingly fast. Director Danny Boyle didn't even want to call it a zombie film, but all the key elements were there. Civilization's collapse, desperate survivors, and the constant threat of infection. That kind of rage zombie also has its roots in Romero's work. In 1973, he directed The Crazies, where a bioweapon virus causes people to go insane and turn violent. The virus escapes a military lab and hits a small town. The movie wasn't as successful as Night of the Living Dead, but it planted a new seed. What if your neighbors, your friends, your loved ones suddenly turned against you? This subgenre moves away from rotting corpses. Here, no one's technically dead. They're just full of mindless rage. We see this in Cell by Stephen King, where a signal sent to phones drives people insane. Hater by David Moody. Crossed by Garth Ennis, a brutally violent comic series. All of them revolve around the same idea, a pandemic that unlocks humanity's most savage instincts. And this version, it's scientifically more plausible than corpses rising from the grave. In fact, the idea may go back to the original Haitian zombie. In the 1980s, Harvard ethnobotanist Wade Davis uncovered the secret behind the so-called dead in Haiti, a neurotoxin derived from pufferfish. Shamans would lace victims' food with the toxin, putting them into a death-like coma. When they came back, their minds were damaged and they became submissive. Davis documented this in The Serpent and the Rainbow, which was later adapted into a horror film by Wes Craven. So yes, a Haitian zombie could exist, but it's not violent, and it requires someone to manually prepare and administer the toxin. That's not very useful for starting a full-blown apocalypse. But what if nature had already created something contagious, something that affects the brain and spreads on its own? Well, it has. There are viruses, bacteria, parasites, and even fungi that attack the human brain. In all these cases, people lose the ability to think clearly or move properly. The most famous example is the rabies virus. In many ways, it acts like a zombie disease. It spreads through broken skin and contaminated saliva, usually via animal bites. The infected become aggressive, paranoid, sleepless, hallucinating, with muscle spasms and rapid heartbeat. Sound familiar? Could we have a global zombie rage pandemic caused by rabies? Not really. There's already a vaccine. If someone's bitten, they can get a rabies shot and be fine. Plus, without treatment, the disease kills its host quickly, meaning they don't have time to infect others. No long rampages. But science has also discovered other diseases that are even more obscure and more terrifying. And that's where prions come in. Prions are abnormally shaped proteins that cause severe damage to the healthy proteins in our brains. In other words, a prion is a protein that causes madness. One disease caused by prions is Kuru, which has already infected humans. It affected a small cannibalistic tribe in Papua New Guinea that had the unfortunate habit of eating human brains as a way to honor their dead and preserve their memory. Quick tip: don't eat brains, especially not from other people. Those infected with Kuru showed symptoms like behavioral changes, including aggression, loss of motor coordination, difficulty speaking, and open sores on the body. Sound familiar? Like zombies? This similarity even inspired the game Dead Island, which takes place on a Pacific island hit by a zombie outbreak caused by Kuru. But don't worry, we're not all going to die of Kuru. The only way to catch it is by eating the brain of an infected person. Once scientists figured out the cause, the number of cases dropped significantly, and there haven't been any reported deaths since 2005. Another prion-related disease that went global was bovine spongiform encephalopathy, better known as mad cow disease. In that case, the prion would break down a cow's brain, turning it into jelly. Humans who ate contaminated beef could develop Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. But again, don't panic. The number of human cases was extremely low, infected cattle were culled, and the outbreak was brought under control. Plus, the disease wasn't contagious between humans. However, if we've learned anything from the COVID-19 pandemic, it's that viruses mutate. A small genetic change can turn a harmless virus into something dangerous. Building on that idea, Dr. Steven Schlossman, a Harvard psychiatrist, wrote The Zombie Autopsies in 2011. Although fictional, the book is grounded in real scientific theory. In the story, scientists manipulate prions and insert them into a virus that spreads through the air, like the flu or COVID-19. The result? A zombie apocalypse. Not with reanimated corpses, but with infected people turning into aggressive, uncontrollable attackers. The virus affects the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that regulates hunger, so the infected feel constant, unbearable hunger, hence the biting. Could a rage-fueled zombie apocalypse really happen? All it would take is a mutated version of Kuru, rabies, or a completely new virus lying dormant somewhere on the planet. But what if the threat isn't a virus at all? What if it's a fungus that alters human metabolism? Let's ask the big question. Could something like The Last of Us really happen? You're not alone in wondering that. Every time you breathe, you're inhaling fungal spores, about 10 billion a day, according to scientists. Most of them are harmless and get eliminated by your immune system. Some can cause illness, but only if your immune defenses are already compromised. We call these opportunistic infections. But when a fungal infection combines with the ability to manipulate its host's behavior, then we're looking at a The Last of Us style scenario. The game is based on a real fungus called Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, or just cordyceps. In real life, it only infects ants, and a specific kind of ant at that. The fungus evolved over millions of years to target just them. Here's what happens. The fungal spore attaches to the ant's body, penetrates its exoskeleton, and reaches the brain. Then it manipulates the ant's behavior. While healthy ants avoid sunlight, the infected one climbs up a stem and bites down, locking its jaws in place. It stays there, alive but paralyzed, for days. The fungus feeds off its body and eventually sprouts out of its head to release more spores. Creepy, right? Worse still, the cordyceps fungus delays the ant's death by releasing substances that fend off bacteria. In other words, the fungus keeps the ant alive, turning it into something very close to an actual zombie. Naturally, when people learn about cordyceps, they start to wonder, what if it jumps to humans? It won't. There are around 750 species of cordyceps, and none infect humans or any complex animals. Each one evolved to target a very specific insect. Making the leap to humans would be an evolutionary jump so big that it's basically impossible, especially since cordyceps has had over 48 million years to try and hasn't succeeded. But that doesn't mean we can ignore fungi. While cordyceps might leave us alone, other fungi aren't so considerate. One serious example is Candida auris, a fungus that's become more infectious over time. If it enters the bloodstream, it spreads quickly and can be fatal. It's already known in hospitals as a superfungus because it resists the strongest disinfectants and antifungal medications. Could Candida auris cause a zombie apocalypse? Guess what? No, it couldn't, but it's still a serious threat. In hospital settings, it's especially dangerous for patients with weakened immune systems, and it has a 30% fatality rate among those infected. So, will we see a zombie apocalypse? Everything points to no, but that's the wrong question. The real question is, if a zombie apocalypse does happen, what are our chances? If you made it this far, you already know. The chances of it actually happening are extremely low. But if it ever did happen, we'd be in serious trouble. Let's be honest, people always think they're prepared. A 2018 survey by The Independent found that 25% of Britons had a zombie apocalypse survival plan. 1 in 4. Only 10% admitted they'd last just a week. And honestly, those 10% were probably right. A study from the University of Leicester showed that if a real zombie outbreak began, the human population would be reduced to just 300 survivors worldwide within 100 days. Those few people would be left to face 300 million zombies around the globe. I'm not a scientist, but sounds like extinction in a few generations. The researchers used a real epidemic model known as SIR, which stands for susceptible, infected, removed, the same model used to calculate the spread of actual diseases. This model divides the population into 3 groups: people who can be infected, people who are already infected, and those who have either died or recovered, with this last group being crucial. In real pandemics, what prevents things from getting worse is that infected people either die or recover, often gaining immunity. If a disease has a very high fatality rate, it limits its own spread, because people die before they can infect others. But in a zombie apocalypse, the scenario changes completely. The infected don't die, and there's no cure. In other words, the number of individuals able to pass on the disease just keeps growing. There's no natural way to reduce it. To adapt the model to this situation, researchers at the University of Leicester added a new variable: the likelihood that survivors would eliminate zombies in order to survive, something not accounted for in real-life epidemics. They also calculated that, over time, survivors would become more skilled at escaping or fighting zombies, lowering their risk of infection. Even with all that, the study concluded with only 273 healthy humans left against 273 million active zombies worldwide. Pessimistic? For sure. You might think you'd figure out a way to survive, but reality says otherwise. A similar study was done in 2009 by Carleton University in collaboration with the University of Ottawa, and it reached the same conclusion: total societal collapse. Their findings suggested the only viable strategy would be to launch rapid, aggressive counterattacks at the very beginning of the outbreak. Wipe out the zombies before it spreads. That would be the only way to ensure containment. If the infection lasted too long, the end result would be humanity's extinction. So, should you curl up in a ball and cry? Not at all. First, because as mentioned, the chances of a zombie apocalypse actually happening are extremely, terrifyingly low. Second, because these scenarios help us think about how to prepare for real disasters. That's exactly what happened in 2011, when the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in the US published a remarkable guide. For those who only know it from movies, the CDC is the organization responsible for dealing with biological threats in the US. They released a document titled Preparedness 101: Zombie Apocalypse. Yes, an official guide on how to survive a zombie invasion. It was written with humor, of course, but the advice was real. The CDC's goal was to raise awareness about actual emergencies, like hurricanes or disease outbreaks. Because in the end, the survival principles are the same: finding shelter, distancing yourself from danger, preparing an emergency kit, securing food, water, and safety. The strategy worked so well that the site received so much traffic it crashed. Everyone wanted to download the guide and see if it was legit. It got way more attention than a typical emergency manual would. Coincidentally, or not, just a few days later, the US Strategic Command released a similar document called Plan 8888. This plan was developed by military officers to train recruits using a fictional zombie outbreak as a fun way to teach strategic defense planning. Initially, the plan was classified, but it was later made public. You can find Plan 8888 online today. Suspicious? Maybe. But since nothing strange has happened since 2011, it's probably just an educational gimmick. What I'm trying to say is this: the fear of the dead rising is ancient, but zombies have become a symbol representing lots of things in modern imagination. The popularity of the so-called zombie apocalypse proves how powerful this symbol is, and it can even be applied to real-world threats like pandemics and catastrophes. Maybe the dead will never rise, but humanity must be prepared for the real challenges that lie ahead, including the next pandemic. And now, tell me, what's your zombie survival plan? I know you're dying to share it. You're confident, right? So spill it in the comments. And don't forget to suggest ideas for the Curiosities series in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell. We're always bringing you the best of zombie pop culture. Zombies are just too good, right? We're in this together. See you in the next video, with the bell turned on.